are live with another episode of the Embracing Joy podcast. And I have a very, very special guest with us today, Dr. Rashmi Schramm. And I'm so excited to introduce her to you all. And of course, the whole purpose of this podcast is so that we can help high-achieving professionals embrace more joy in their personal and professional lives. And Dr. Rashmi Schramm is a specialist in family medicine and also in Ayurvedic medicine and meditation. And her skills help us to be more peaceful and well-rounded so that we embrace more joy in our lives, especially for women professionals and women physicians. So it's great to have you on. I'm so excited to have you.
I am so grateful to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So I am going to go through, I usually start with just going through your bio. I want people to know more about you and your area of expertise so that they can know that this information is coming from such a reputable source. So let me go into your introduction. So Dr. Rashmi Schramm is a board certified family physician, and she has over 21 years. You wouldn't tell by looking at her. She looks 21, but over 21 years of clinical experience. She's also a trauma-informed coach and meditation teacher. She helps busy women tap into their own inner peace and power so that they can enjoy more energetic and fulfilling lives. Yeah. So that's great. She's also, I wanted to say some of your certification because you're also a certified integrative health coach. So you also do a lot of coaching. She's also a certified I am Yoga Nidra teacher. And I'll tell you a little bit about Yoga Nidra in a minute. I have a story. And then she's also a Chopra certified PSM meditation teacher and a Chopra certified Ayurvedic lifestyle teacher. Wow. So you have a lot of experience in this field of wellness and meditation, and it's just great to have you. So we start our show with a quick game. The game is called Convergence. So what you'll do is you'll say the first word, we'll say the first word that's on our mind.
Okay.
So we'll count 3, 2, 1 and say the first word that's on your mind, and then we'll try to see if our words connect in somehow for the next word, right? So say I said apple and you said big right at the same time. And then we think about, how do these two things connect? And we both said New York at the same time, right?
Okay.
Or something that may relate the two. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So let's start with the game. Okay. To get warmed up.
All right.
On the count of 3, say the first word that comes to your mind. Okay.
Okay.
3, 2, 1. Bright.
Blue moon.
Bright and blue moon. Okay. Bright and blue moon. Okay. Something that connects to those two. Ready?
Okay.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. Stars.
Sky.
Night sky. Okay. Night sky, but try to keep it one word. I know it's still night skies. Okay. Yeah. But okay. Night sky and stars. Okay. Night sky and stars. Okay. That's pretty good. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Universe.
Peaceful.
Peaceful and universe. Okay. Peaceful universe. That's something that connects those two. 3, 2, 1. Spirit.
Grounding. Oh.
Spirit and grounding.
It's kind of the same.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, we'll keep going. Spirit and grounding. What connects those two? 3, 2, 1. Source.
Self.
I put source like the source.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, that's kind of what self means.
Yeah, so self and the source. So we're kind of like, there.
Yeah.
So source and the self. We can try again to see if we can connect those two. 3, 2, 1.
True.
Body and true. Okay. Body and true. 3, 2, 1. Presence.
Healing. Oh, I like presence. Yes.
Yeah, healing and presence. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really good.
Like, really paralleling each other pretty closely here.
Right, 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 which is great.
Yeah.
We'll try it one more time before we get started. Let's just
Okay.
see. So healing and presence. What connects those two? Three, two, one. Soul.
Love.
Soul and love. Yeah. Okay. I like that. Yeah. I mean, it's a fun game just to see if we can say the same word, but it's also helps us like get into the spirit of the talk as
Yeah.
well, and also just to free our minds and just say the first thing that comes up out of
Beautiful.
your mind. So yeah. So this was great. I have some questions
You
for
bet.
you,
You
Rashmi,
bet.
especially with all of your experience with meditation and Ayurvedic medicine, as well as family medicine and coaching women professionals, right? You prioritize women professionals regardless of their
Yeah, yeah.
profession,
Yeah,
right?
because
Not
it
just
turns out we all have the same issues. It's actually
what would
more like a human common, experience, but, just so happens that I happen to be a professional woman, and so, we get to heal ourselves first before we go trying to heal somebody else.
right. And it may seem as though a lot of us may want to heal other people first, right?
Oh, for
You know,
sure, it feels
for
like it's a
women,
little bit easier.
well, it's easier to see what's going on with other people than to
Yeah,
see what's going on with us sometimes.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
So, as far as peace is very big for you, I know you have a wonderful podcast called, remind me the name, called
I inner
Peace and
inner peace
Power.
and power.
Inner
Yep,
Peace and
yep,
Power. Yes,
yep.
Inner Peace and Power. And I love that you pay so much attention to the importance of peace in our lives. How would you advise, like just a example of how would you advise like a busy professional woman to integrate like moments of peace within their schedule, like as a sample? I know everyone's what they may do is different, but as a general piece of advice for someone who's very busy and she's professional and she's trying to figure out how can I find a moment of peace today? Because I just feel that I am called in every direction and I have no sense of peace.
Yeah, no, I think
Mhm,
that's a very real thing, and that was in fact the main reason that I started to figure out like, okay, whatever is happening in my life, everything looks great on the outside, but it's very turbulent on the inside, and I just do not literally don't know how to even connect to my peace. Like it wasn't even like I had no real felt sense for a while there. And I think that's a good way to think about burnout when we're always overworked and always overwhelmed. And we can burn out in any profession in any area of our lives. We can burn out in relationships, we can burn out in caretaking, we can burn out at work, we can burn out in parenting. Like there's all these different places we can burn out. And
mhm,
and one of those cardinal signs is like what I used to have, like, and I could still get that, by the way. It's not like I'm somehow cured of all these things. I'm definitely not. But
mhm,
this idea of peace was so elusive to me. And so that's why I kind of started to go study a lot of these things. And when I started to study them, there was no social media, there was no like online anything. And so I dove deep to get at the community. And that's how I ended up with some of these, so many of these different teachings and learnings at a deep level. So this
mhm,
idea of peace isn't the same as calm. So I want to make sure that that's really clear, right? So peace, sometimes we think of, I don't know, sitting by a lotus pond in like cross-legged position or like on top of a mountain or something. Like that's definitely not what I'm talking about when I say peace. It's this
mhm,
idea of lightness. It's this idea of feeling grounded, this idea of safety within ourselves, and that we can practice, right? And it turns out that's actually our inherent ground state anyway. If you think about little kids and how they are generally pretty happy, joyful, peaceful, and so long as their basic needs are met, they're pretty happy and joyful and peaceful. And so I
mhm,
think of peace as kind of the neutral place that we kind of have to run through to find that joy. And so uh, there's so many different ways to find even just that moment of peace, right? So sometimes it can be with a cup of tea, if that is something that you enjoy. It can be with just a breath. It can be with 2 minutes out in nature. It can be really any of these things that shouldn't take up a lot of your time. And remember, we're human beings. So we're also always looking to connect with someone else in a very authentic, genuine way of like belonging can also literally give us peace as well.
Mhm.
And so the list is endless, but it's very specific to like what works for you versus what works for me and what's available to you, right? Like,
Mhm.
are you in a big urban setting where it's not that easy to go take a walk in the, in a park for 10 minutes? If that's the case, what else can we do? Those types of things. So I hope that answers without necessarily like skirting around it, but peace isn't calm, although calm can be peaceful, of course, because sometimes we can just be like totally disconnected and appear pretty calm.
Yeah, I love that you specify the difference because it can be a little confusing because we can feel like I'm not like you may not feel at peace, but you may take a moment to say, "Oh, I'm going to sit and meditate," but not really feel that
Oh, yeah.
awoke, that peace that you want to feel because your brain is still hyperactive, or you may not have that idea of safety. Like, even though you may be calm in that moment, you may not feel safe overall. So I like that you specify that difference because I don't think it's talked about too much. That's kind of new that I'm hearing that piece is, of course, unique and it's different from that sense of calm. And I like that you gave some great examples as well, like taking that time. So remembering that everyone's sense of peace is going to be different. What brings peace to me? Like, say you don't like bugs, right? So going to the going to the park and being exposed to, mosquitoes or whatever, if that gives you anxiety, that walk is not peaceful for you. So finding something that you find peaceful and, including that and incorporating that into your day is powerful. Tell me more about meditation. I know that's big for you. I know when I was a medical student, I was going to tell you a story about Yoga Nidra. I learned about, so I did yoga a lot in medical school, throughout medical school. And there's an interesting reason for that. The reason for that was the gym in my building was, I had an apartment complex in North Carolina, UNC, and they were doing construction on my gym. So they gave us free gym membership to a local gym and they
Yeah.
had yoga classes. So that's when I started taking yoga classes. And my favorite pose has always been the corpse pose,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
just to
Yeah, you
lay
bet.
yeah, just to lay down and
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
take that time to just breathe and let every part of my body relax. And then while I was studying medical school, I thought, if my favorite pose is this, I wonder if there's some type of yoga that only focuses on this. So then I did like YouTube searches, like I just want to do this only. I just want to lay down and relax. So I discovered Yoga Nidra, and I would do like a bedtime Yoga Nidra, which is pretty much a body scan, a Yoga Nidra before bed. And that helped me a lot through, like, before taking exams, before the MCAT, a lot of those things. So tell me more about your journey into yoga, and then what particular specialty of yoga that you're passionate about, and how you've seen it help you or help others.
Oh, what a great question. I could talk about this forever, so you're gonna have to time
Okay.
me.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I was born in India, in South India, and I lived there until I was 12. And I lived with a very large extended family, and the matriarch was my grandmother. And she, not just her, but like really everyone that I was exposed to or near had a very spiritual, kind of way of being, which is what yoga really is. It's a way of being. And so yoga, whether it was breath work or the meditation or the asanas, which are the poses, just felt natural and normal and was not anything that I thought everyone did yoga every morning. Like I didn't know because that's just what I saw. And then we immigrated to the US, and for lack of better words, for this kind of extreme assimilation that I think that we had to do, because there were so many stark differences culturally, kind of abandoned really all of those roots just to fit in, right? Which of course can be dangerous and toxic, but that's okay. We don't know that when we're 12. And I don't know, probably most 12-year-olds are doing that anyway. So then you fast forward to college where I kind of reconnected with some of that, not just culturally, but also just meditation, mindfulness, all that stuff. And I still kept it on the down low because back then, I had some kind of misunderstanding or socially conditioned set of thoughts or beliefs that made me think that I was weak for practicing meditation, or there was a weakness because I went to these yoga things. Like, it was really weird. It was really interesting. I didn't know it at the time, so I was literally like a closet meditator. That's exactly
Mm,
what I would call myself. And then
mhm,
you fast forward to, through med school training, all that other stuff. And then several years ago, I found myself, so now I have a 19-year-old and 17-year-old, and they're both in college. And I found myself, probably 12, 13 years ago, just in the depths of some of those symptoms that you were talking about, really not understanding how I could possibly pull myself out. And that's when I reconnected back with some of my yoga and meditation practices. And again, back then, because I didn't have a local community, or at least not one that I knew of, I really started to study through Chopra Center, Chopra Global, all of that. And it was so helpful and useful to have the accountability in the community. And that sort of blossomed into Yoga Nidra and advanced Yoga Nidra, and then sort of advanced forms of other meditation as well. And it was so healing and nourishing for me. And part of getting trained is you do, like, to get the certification, you do have to go teach several classes, which makes sense, right? And so I was doing these just to kind of do the certification bit, but people were having crazy results. Like, they were like, "Oh my gosh, like, you just have this in your back pocket and you're not using it." And particularly Yoga Nidra during the pandemic, it's like this really funny story. One of my college best friends, she literally texted me and she said, "Listen, everyone in my family has lost their minds. I need for you to send me a TED talk that I can show them on how to fix them." And I was like, "Oh, this is great. This is such a good question." So I sent her a Yoga Nidra practice, and she's like, "What is
mm,
this? What is this?" "No, I need them to be fixed, but I am not the problem." That was
mhm,
so funny. And so then, like, 2 days later, she's like, "You have this in your back pocket, and you're not sharing it with the world." And I was like, "Oh, what?" I didn't
mm,
know that anybody needed or wanted it. I was using these just very one-on-one in a very small niche practice, and was very happy doing so, keeping myself really small and getting some small results. And so it really blossomed from the pandemic, I would say. I had no idea that I could even do Zoom or anything online. At
mhm,
that point, I had never done any of those things before. And so I took some of that online, or at least my offerings online, and the lineage of Yoga Nidra with which I'm trained in. And there are about 5 lineages that are, that trace back to millennia usually, right? Like teacher to student, teacher to student. As
mhm,
far as yoga is concerned, meditation is concerned, it's a really important part of keeping the culture intact, not necessarily religious, but culturally intact and respectful without kind of like yanking out different pieces of it. So my particular lineage of Yoga Nidra, again, not religious, but spiritual, is very much so focused on the present and healing the present, and very much so in a way of creating safety, and from a polyvagal lens, right? Like, there's the ventral vagal, which is where we're connected to each other, we're feeling present, and we're feeling some sense of okayness or peaceness, like whatever you want to call it, right? Like, it's not in that fight or flight, and it's not in that dorsal disconnect where we can appear calm but totally are disconnected. So
mhm,
this kind of yoga nidra is really designed very specifically to bring us into that connected present state. And you're right, there's so many different techniques that we use and we go through, and body scanning is definitely one of them. It's so powerful, it's so simple, right? And
mhm,
breath work is another one. We use intentions, we use affirmations, and it's fully guided. And so for me, it's actually really healing for me when I facilitate any of these sessions, is what I have learned. And so need it I need to deliver it and teach it as much as I actually need to receive it as well. And so it comes full circle, in that it's like such a privilege to be in this place of being able to navigate some of the nuances within, like whether it's yoga or meditation or yoga nidra, and be able to share it from a very authentic place.
right. That's really wonderful, and you were able to help So many people, especially during the pandemic, with your practice and as well as with your podcast as well, the Inner Peace and Power podcast. And I had the pleasure of joining you. Well, you guided a meditation when you were in Florida last year, and that was wonderful as well. I definitely see the benefit in taking that time to focus on our breath and to focus on the present moment. It's definitely a calming benefit and allows us to appreciate and find the joy that's there within that present moment as well. So that's just wonderful work that you're able to do. Can you tell us how, you also work a lot with like overcoming trauma because you're trauma certified as well. Can you tell us about some ways that high achieving women can address their past traumas to foster more joyful and fulfilling life? I know one of those ways may be through meditation, yoga practice, but what would you say is one key way or the first step you would say to take one high achieving woman who feels that she's had workplace trauma or trauma in her life that she needs to address to move forward? What would be the first step for her? Mhm.
Yeah, so I want to kind of just address this whole idea first in that when I first came into any of this work, whether it was meditation or even medicine in general, I
Mhm.
thought trauma was something that happened to some other people, not to
Mhm.
anyone that I knew. Like, oh, because I couldn't name like the top three things that I thought of as trauma. But that's not actually it at all. Trauma, what I learned, not just practicing medicine, but learning some of these tools during some of my coaching training and also just like yoga therapy training and or yoga nidra training is that trauma is a universal human experience, and not just during
Mhm.
training, but I see it every single day when I'm working with, right now I'm working with a lot of women, but men have trauma, plenty of trauma as well, right?
Mhm.
And this trauma, it can be trauma with a big T, trauma with a little t. Of course, we have the ACEs during childhood. That's a whole separate, we can talk about that for another hour, which we're not going to. But I want to set the stage for this idea that we're not broken and trauma isn't necessarily something that needs to be fixed or necessarily almost like put to the side, right? Because
Mhm.
it is already and always kind of already within our own mind body system, whether we recognize it or not, right? So, this
Mhm.
idea of even just turning towards pain or trauma is the first and most important step, is just saying, well, maybe there is something here, right? And so I would say that's the first thing. And there's largely an understanding in the trauma informed community that trauma lives in our body, right? Like
Mhm.
trauma lives in our body. It is the mirror for the subconscious mind. We may think that we have compartmentalized workplace trauma, childhood trauma, any other trauma, right? Like
Mhm.
however that appears. And trauma can really be what happened to us, right? It's not what happened to us while this event was happening. And trauma can also be good things that should have happened that didn't happen as well. So there's all kinds of different ways in which
Mhm.
our bodies are taking in the disconnection from either safety or expectation and the lack thereof, or an actual like complete, like disconnect from safety, which is also, trauma as well. So it's kind of just establishing that trauma is a human experience, and that it is, when we start to turn towards it, we
Mhm.
really kind of need to work within the body itself, rather than just changing our thoughts or feeling like we just have to, if I could just change my thoughts, then I'll fix whatever, right? Like that can actually be a trauma response of people that can just be really dangerous and require a lot of work as well. And so the first thing would just be to bring awareness and softness to it,
Mhm.
right? And the other thing, the other kind of really big idea that I want to present is that we don't have to go back to the past to heal the past. When we're healing the present, we're
Mhm.
healing the past,
Mm.
right? Because we're carrying that with us. So if we are able to bring some nurturing and healing within ourselves, and it's going to take as long as it takes, right? And so it's really really helpful to work with someone who is trauma informed. It's really really helpful to create a connection that feels safe, to create a connection that feels physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally safe for someone. And that can just be the container from which we can start to heal little by little by little, right? Rather than sort of fighting with it, or saying, like, like, why is this still here? All of the things, right? It's all those second, third arrow stuff that starts to happen.
Mhm.
So trauma is a universal human experience. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with us. It can
Mhm.
just keep us in a constricted state. And when we turn our awareness and just give ourselves permission to be soft with it, that's half the battle. That's half the battle. And then when we need help, to ask for help, because that's the other big one,
Right.
is we are also conditioned not to ask for help. Right? Like, look,
Right.
so Dr. Makda, I'm gonna say, without a doubt in my mind, you just being a Black woman in medicine, you have had more microaggressions than we can even name or talk about in the next 6 hours, right? Like, I know this hands down, I know it.
Mhm.
And it's trauma. It's
Yeah,
trauma.
it's
Okay,
trauma, it's
it
trauma.
is trauma. It is trauma. It is not escapable. It's trauma, but that's not who you are. It's how you're maneuvering through it. That's what's healing for you, right? Like,
Mhm.
yes, we should be reforming societies, and yes, we should be shifting all kinds of things, but that won't happen overnight. But in the meantime, how can you bring some softness into yourselves? Like, how can I bring myself permission to be like, I'm still here, I'm still okay, and that really sucked.
Right. I love that. You really opened my eyes a lot into understanding trauma a little bit more. I have the realization, of course, but it sounds like it's also grief, right? Grief is
Right.
included in trauma, like grief of
Absolutely.
something
Absolutely.
that you wanted to happen that may not have happened, or you know that you should have been treated better, or that of course, grief to how things should be but they're not, or you have to go through certain things that is traumatic in a way as well.
Yeah.
So, and of course, as humans, we're living in this non-perfect world, right? And
Right.
things are going to happen that affect all of us in different ways,
That's right.
and that can be trauma. But when we think about trauma, we only think about like severe things. Like most of us, especially in medicine, like as a physician, when I
Yeah,
first you think trauma, I think of a trauma center, right? We
for
have a
sure.
huge trauma center here, which
Yep.
is writer trauma. So we're thinking gunshot wounds, we're thinking death, we're thinking murder, we're thinking,
Yep.
the
That's right.
horrible thing. But there are other traumas, right? It could be a divorce, your parents, that, like you said, with the ACEs, it could be parental neglect, divorce, or people were not there for you in the way that you needed them in that time when you needed them. All of those things can cause different traumas in your body, apparently. And it's important to take time to acknowledge that, and like you said, acknowledge that, bring awareness and softness to it, and heal yourself now. You can't be that 5-year-old that when your parents divorce, you can't go back there to help her, but you can help yourself now, and you're helping her by helping yourself now and moving forward. And finding help, asking for help, and knowing that you're not alone. You may have been alone at one point, but you're not alone now. You're an adult now. You can get resources now. You can get the help you need now. So I like that. It's very empowering the way you speak about trauma, and it's important to acknowledge that trauma, because you don't go straight from having things happen and trauma to finding peace, right? You have to embrace all of those things, right? Embrace the trauma that you experience, bring that softness to yourself, and then tell us how you would move from that, like just to peace, and then to finding joy in a way. Like, I
Oof.
know
Yeah.
everybody's trajectory is different, but just a overall like pathway, like a big overview.
Yeah. Yeah.
What that
Yeah.
pathway would look
Yeah.
like.
So I think starting from a place of I'm not broken, and like non-pathologizing, right? Like, whatever has happened to us has happened to us. Whatever we experience, not pretending it didn't happen, not, like blowing it off and or making it into everything. Like, this idea of, that's kind of what I mean by bringing some softness to it, is it's here, it's arising. Let's be curious with it in a safe way, right? So that I think will eventually become someone's default, but it's not easy. It's not easy at all, right? Like, you really do need to have some amount of help. And what I mean by when we heal the present, we heal the past is it's a very holistic paradigm rather than really like in the West. And I'm not trained as a psychiatrist or a psychologist or even a therapist. I'm certainly not any of those, but I have this idea of like we have to go lay on someone's couch and talk about the event that happened when we were 6 in order to heal it. But that's not actually the case. That's really the only point that I'm trying to make is sure that can be a way, but in this holistic sense, we don't have to go back to the exact event because the body already knows how to heal itself, right? And
Mhm,
so to kind of come back to this particular direction of, how do we round into peace and then move eventually into joy? I think of it as being just two buckets of emotions, and our emotions are all valid. They're not always true or real, but they're valid. And I think of fear over here as the constrictive bucket, and then love or joy over here as the expansive bucket. We immediately are like attached to the love or joy thing because it just feels like, oh, that's how I should be all the time. That's how society kind of conditions us. I should be happy all the time. I should be expansive all the time. But like expansion is only expansion because there's contraction. And
mhm,
so this idea of acknowledging pain, allowing pain, and pain by pain, I mean, it can be fear, it can be jealousy, it can be anger, it can be any of those things that are constrictive, that are just messengers for us. So when we get into the habit of allowing and acknowledging and moving past or through some of these things, rather than suppressing them, which is what we're taught to do, right? When we allow that, then joy is already naturally present. It's already always
mhm,
there, right?
mhm,
And peace is a byproduct of joy. Joy is a byproduct of peace. Like whichever
mhm,
one you want to see is fine. But this expansion is where we do start to grow further within ourselves, which is really the only way that we can help anyone else. Like I am absolutely nowhere close to being like where I want to be, right? I'm also acknowledging and allowing whatever is arising without necessarily judging it or trying to squash it down on my journey into this expansive state. And so
mhm.
I hope that helps to kind of like this idea of it's very, it seems esoteric, but it's also very practical as well.
Mhm, mhm. And you also have to give credit to yourself for where you are now, right? So just
Yes.
taking that, yeah, just to acknowledge, sometimes we forget, like we know where we want to be. Like
Yes.
I wish I was like joyful all the time, or I wish I was this all the time. But I also acknowledge that I'm much more joyful now than I was 2 years ago or 3 years ago. So and that's enough. It's a part of the journey and acknowledging where you are now. And of course, things may happen that are traumatic in different way. You may lose, you may lose a loved one. Things may happen, but your response to it may be better now than it has been in the past. So acknowledging that growth along your journey, if you do have that. Yeah. So, but of course, God forbid that ever happen, but that's it does happen, all the time in
Well,
different.
right, right, and yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, we often say, like, life never stops giving us opportunities to practice some of these things that we talk about, right? It's not like anyone's ever fully finished or reached whatever state they're, like, there, like, that steady state, that just doesn't exist, and accepting whatever arises is so powerful, just being present to it is so powerful that the inevitable release of whatever resistance there is always really does give us more access to that piece. It just gives us access to it. And we have to
Mhm,
practice getting there, and we have to practice finding that joy, right? Like even though it's already always there, we may have had practice not finding it or avoiding it because joy
mhm,
is a very vulnerable place and so is peace. And
mhm,
so it's a practice in vulnerability, it's a practice in a way of being that might take us a while. I'm still learning it, like we just moved in both of our kids, one is older and the other is so second year of college and the first year of college, and we're empty nesters. We just literally like 2 days ago came home. It was like 2 full days of moving, and we were like, oh, we'll have a champagne toast, we like and we were so exhausted, my husband and I. We were just like, I cannot, like, I cannot speak to anyone, I cannot do anything, I cannot move. And it wasn't that late in the evening, but that's
mhm.
that's fine. There was just
Right,
exhaustion, and then it can coexist with joy, relief, grief, all of it's totally there.
right.
And
Yeah,
it's
because
and it's
you're
supposed to be
saying.
there. Like it isn't all joy and fun and games. Like there's gonna be pain, and it
Mhm.
coexists with joy.
Right, and it makes you appreciate it more at the same time. You appreciate those joyful moments more because sometimes we find, you may feel joy, but then you feel guilty, like, oh, I shouldn't feel joyful in this moment. But it's important for us to appreciate both, right? Because it's
That's
easy
right.
for us to say, oh, I feel hurt and stay there, like I'm
Yeah,
feeling hurt.
yeah.
But when you feel joyful, a lot of times, especially, as high achieving
Yes.
professional women, and when you feel joyful, you may want to stay there, but you may feel guilty staying in a joyful moment even for a little longer
Oh, yeah.
th- than it's supposed to be because you're like, well, actually, I don't feel safe. Like you said, maybe I don't feel safe here because I'm too happy. Maybe something bad is going to happen again.
Yeah,
So let me just go back to feeling like, worried or anxious or concerned about something because you may be more used to feeling that way, like, or it can be a habit at the same time too, where you feel more used to or comfortable in a certain mind state. So,
yeah,
but it's important to embrace them all, right? And to also, when those moments of joy come, like, thank God you're able to drop off your kids in college, right? So, and that's a great accomplishment that you've been working for many years and they've been working for their whole childhood career, education to get them to college, and they're out of the house and they're growing up, which of course is wonderful. They're healthy, they're in college, they're independent, and it's amazing. But at the same time, you're grieving, like, oh, they're no longer home with us. What am I going to do? You may be feeling anxious in that way. So all of those emotions are wrapped in one, but you can kind of choose which one you want to lean more into at the same time.
right,
Yeah. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right. Because we in our yoga nidra practice, we have a practice within the practice where it's a breathwork practice, but then we kind of come back to remembering that our energy is always following our attention. And so we can allow, right, whatever is arising and then choose to put our attention where it feels most nourishing for us. And that's maybe joy, it may be softness, it may be peace, it may be just being.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that that's so important. So with that, I think that's a great ending to wrap up on because it's a great step. I think that's an action step that some of our viewers can take as far as like when something does arise, to embrace that present moment and also take the intention of where do I want to go to with this. Like I may have thoughts that are pulling me to one side versus pulling me to another side, but I'm going to choose the side that makes me feel light, that makes me feel more joy, that makes me feel more empowered, right? So that's one quick action step. I wanted to say we have a wrap-up question. So let's go through our wrap-up questions and then I'll
Okay.
tell the audience on how they can connect with you after we finish with the wrap-up question. So Dr. Rashmi, who is a model for joy in your life and why?
Oof. Does it have to be someone I know in person?
Does not have to be. It could be anyone. Yeah, it
Okay.
could be
Okay, okay, I'll
any.
tell you the first person that comes to mind right now,
Okay.
and I think
Mhm.
that's Michelle Obama. Like, I
Oh, really?
think just the way in which she exudes realness
Mhm.
and, like, really talks about some difficult, tough things, like,
Mhm.
so parenting and marriage and all these things, and is so, like, open to joy, like, it's just definitely something that I'm always aspiring to be very real, authentic, and joyful. Because we don't want to be like, and I think you're one of those people too. Like we don't want to be like the bypassers of all the negative stuff and just be like I'm happy all the time. Like we know that that doesn't exist. But yes, that's who comes to mind right this instant. She's just a
Oh,
very delightful, joyful human.
okay. So if you were cooking a cake of joy, Rashmi, what would your top three ingredients be and why?
Oh my lord. Okay. Okay. It would be definitely presence,
Hmm.
gratitude,
Okay.
and curiosity.
Okay. I like those. Yeah, those sound like great. So curiosity, gratitude, and presence.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Can you explain a little bit why you picked those 3? Mhm.
you bet. You bet. So most of the time, we're actually not present.
Okay.
We're usually, like, ruminating about something that happened, or we're trying to guess what's gonna happen in the next minute or 2, or the next second or 2, or the next hour or 2, and so just being in the present moment can actually be a cure, and not a cure, because then that's pathologizing, but it can be nourishing and healing in and of itself, right? And then the second part, which is curiosity, can really be so powerful if we allow it to be, especially if we're curious about ourselves and what's arising in here first, because we are so judgy. Why am
Mhm.
I tired? Why am I not, able to knock out the next 3 hours of work? Why is my room look so messy? Like, all of these things, if we could just come back to, like, oh, what's going on here? How can I move through in a way that I can organize for the next 3 hours? How can I refocus myself? How can I, like, that's a curious place to be in the real world, right? Because we're not all like hiking in Sedona all of our lives. Like, we're living lives and we're maneuvering some pretty challenging things sometimes. So curiosity about ourselves, curiosity about others, curiosity about what's there, and then gratitude. That's fairly self explanatory. We have so much scientific evidence that gratitude is a great drug
Mhm.
pathway into joy and into actually feeling more alive and
Mhm.
having more of these wins that are coming our way when we are grateful for the things that we have. And so I hope that helps. That's kind of how I think about that.
Yeah, I love that cake. That sounds like a awesome cake of joy that you made and really powerful ingredients. So we're wrapping up our show. This is the end of our episode, but I want to make sure that the audience knows how to connect with you, especially if they are looking for a coach to help them as far as with meditation or integrative wellness, this service. And also they should check out your podcast as well, the Inner Peace and Power podcast. So you all can also find her on her website, which is rashmischramm.com. You could see the spelling in our YouTube video, and I'll link her website in the comments as well. And you can also find her on Instagram and YouTube. And her YouTube channel is Dr. Rashmi Schramm Optimal Wellness. And her Instagram, you can find her at Dr. Rashmi Schramm. Do you want to add anything, Dr. Rashmi, before
No,
we?
this was so
Yeah.
wonderful. I'm so grateful to be here. I'm so grateful to have spent this time and just learning and understanding. And again, just taking away a whole bunch of gratitude from this conversation.
Thank you. Well, this was a wonderful conversation. I learned so much more just speaking with you about this topic. And I just want everyone to share this episode with a friend if you learned something. I know you did, and try to take some action steps to embrace more joy and peace in your lives.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Okay. All right. All right. And that's it, everyone. Take care. Okay.